What's going on? Welcome to the Blue Shoes Fitness Podcast, where we talk about strength training, nutrition, faith, family, and how all of those things work together for parents like you and me. My name is Coach Jay, and I've got another unpopular opinion episode today. And if you haven't listened to it already, my previous episode was all about some of my own unpopular nutrition opinions that are, quote, actually unpopular. And today I want to share a few thoughts regarding the fitness and workout space. And I hope that this discussion will challenge some of the widespread information and misinformation that you've heard in hopes of providing a new and helpful perspective for you to learn from. Let's start off with our verse of the week, and then we'll get into our topic. This verse is out of the book of Matthew. This is from the Sermon on the Mount, and this is Matthew 7, verse 12. You've likely heard this before, even if you haven't ever opened up a Bible ever. It says, "So in everything you do, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." And I wanted to share this with you because this is something that we have deemed as the golden rule. And a lot of people might associate this with Jesus as saying, yeah, Jesus was the one who came up with the golden rule. But in fact, that's not quite true. And he did put a very unique spin on this, and you can see if you catch it here in a moment. But he did not come up with this original concept. And I wanted to share just a couple of examples of people who came before and much further before Jesus that gave examples of this same sort of line of thinking. So in ancient Greece, there was a man named Isocrates, not Socrates, but Isocrates. He came about 400 years or so before Jesus. And he said, "Do not do to others that which angers you when they do it to you." Right before Jesus, about a generation or so before Jesus, there was another famous religious leader, Rabbi Hillel, who was a very famous, very influential leader in the Jewish community at the time, and very influential even today. And he has a quote that says, "That which is hateful to you, do not do unto your fellow." So there were a number of philosophers and religious leaders, even outside of Christianity and much earlier than Christianity, that have been quoted with similar thoughts of these here of, don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you, which sort of sounds like what Jesus said, but Jesus had a very small but very big uh, impact on the way that he spun it. And that is that Jesus's version was a proactive version of these. So rather than simply stopping at don't do to other people what you don't want them to do to you. So just, don't harm other people or don't malign them because, you don't want them to do it back to you. He went so far as to say, rather do to others what you would have them do to you. And that puts the onus on the individual, on the believer in this case, on each of us, where we go, okay, this is not just about trying to live this quiet, peaceful life where we don't, do anything bad to other people. Rather, we are called to actively look for opportunities to serve the people around us. And I thought that was a beautiful way of, and it finishes up by that verse saying, "For this sums up the law and the prophets." And I think that is a beautiful way of summing all of that up. And this is the wisdom of Jesus in its full form right here. So I wanted to share that with you here today. All right, let's get into today's topic, some actually unpopular opinions workout edition. Like I said in the intro, my goal here is to share some information that I do hope and think will be helpful in and of itself, but I mostly want to provide a new perspective for you that allows you to think outside of the box when it comes to your own training choices and related goals. I kind of poked fun at the unpopular opinion style post in the last episode about nutrition unpopular opinions, and it's going to be a little bit more of the same here. And I think a lot of it's going to come across maybe as some tough love, where some of these things are going to be unpopular, where you might have this visceral like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that, or oh, that's pretty harsh. But some of it might just come across as some tough love of, you go, you know what, I have kind of been avoiding thinking about that topic in that way. And now that you say it like that, it really kind of hits home. So I'm hoping that that's what this does here. This is not about elevating my own opinion. This is about, in a sense, kind of playing devil's advocate, where sharing some thoughts that you are then forced to decide, okay, do I agree with that? Do I disagree with that? And then why or why not? All right, let's get into it. My first unpopular opinion on the list is, if you say that a workout isn't hard enough, it's likely that you simply weren't working hard enough. This is a common concern that I get from seeing people online, even working with clients, is that people will say, I want a more difficult or a more challenging workout program. The workout program that I'm following or the workout program that you wrote for me isn't hard enough. And a lot of times, what people have in their heads is that a more advanced or a more difficult workout program means that they are need to switch up every factor in their program because there are, they have in their head that there are beginner things that you do, and then there are more intermediate, more advanced things that you do. But a more advanced style of workout isn't just about adding more sets, more reps, more exercises, more difficult exercises, things like that. Rather, more advanced programs actually kind of pare down a lot of those kinds of things, and they just often involve more nuance when it comes to technique and form adjustments, pushing and pulling from different angles, and doing things that would seem maybe repetitive for those who are in a quote beginner or basic program. And a lot of these kinds of nuances aren't going to be necessary or even overly helpful for someone who is more of a beginner in their fitness journey. And so that's really, in my head, one of the big differences between a beginner program versus a more advanced program is more advanced does not just mean more work. Largely, it means getting more specific about the types of adaptations that you're looking for, rather than just saying, I'm going to get stronger, or I'm going to get bigger, or I'm going to get leaner, or whatever your goal might be. You get more specific on what your goals look like and more specific on the routes that you take to reach those. And so, kind of snaking back to the beginning of this here, it's not that the workout program is not difficult enough. It's usually a matter of that your intensity level is not where it needs to be, because an advanced workout program could look like, 1 to 2 working sets of an exercise where you are working really close to proximity, or really close proximity to failure. Whereas a lot of the times people have it in their idea that something like German volume training, for example, of doing 10 sets of 10, that's like what real advanced people do. And a beginner could do that. It would probably not be overly helpful, but you could do that. You'd have to work very maximally for most of that workout. But that's just an example of a difference between something that feels productive versus something that might actually be productive. All right, next up, unpopular opinion: stay away from coaches and workout programs that promise to destroy you. So, an interesting phenomenon that happens when you tell your friends that you're a personal trainer is that they invite you to their own workouts and they say, I want you to run me through just a crazy workout. And they have this idea that because you're a personal trainer and this is what you do and study for a living, that you have some secret knowledge of how to just absolutely destroy your muscles in a workout. You might see this advertised with phrases like, try this brutal biceps and triceps workout. Something like, you won't be able to walk after this legs workout, as if that's a good thing. On the cardio side, your lungs are going to be on fire during this HIIT workout. And people use those kinds of, that phraseology to go, oh, now I want to join in on that because that sounds intense. That sounds brutal. That sounds difficult. And I want to be able to do difficult things. I want to be able to do that. And it sounds like it's productive. And that is not really how working out goes. And a big part of working out is the recovery side of it, is the recoverability side of things, where you don't need to be doing a leg workout that renders you unable to walk or to climb up or down the stairs or to be able to walk out to your car after a workout. You might feel like that for a minute, but that is not the goal of any kind of a workout that is related to building strength, building muscle, anything in those categories there. Number 3 that I'm going to talk about here in just a sec is actually going to be a bit of a getting even more specific on this. I'm going to do some name dropping here. Let's just get into it here. Number 3, 75 hard is one of the worst ways to approach health and fitness for 99.9% of people. If you are not familiar with 75 hard, it is, I'm going to say it's a fitness program, but in big bold letters at the top of their website, on Andy Frisella's website, it says, this is not a fitness program. 75 hard is a transformative mental toughness program. So that's already got some red flags for me that really stem from that number two opinion here, talking about the programs that promise to destroy you. Does a transformative mental toughness program, does that sound like something that is aimed at destroying you? It sort of sounds like that to me. If you're unfamiliar, here's the deal: is 75 is related to 75 days. So this program is 75 days, and hard is related to the fact that this is very difficult, not just to do, but to sustain. They have a list of rules here. Let me read these off for you here. And I don't specifically really mean to pick on 75 hard, though it really does just kind of irk me that this is such a popular thing. But I do want to use this as a bit of a case study of the types of things that render a program generally unhelpful for most people. Okay, so these are some of the daily rules that they have. There are 6 of them. Number 1, follow a diet. That sounds reasonable so far. Number 2, do 2 45-minute workouts per day. Okay, so our reasonable level just dropped like crazy. So working out for 90 minutes every day. So that means over the course of the 75-day program that you will have completed 150 workouts. And that's what, 2.5 months? 150 workouts? That's a lot. Next up, no alcohol or cheat meals. Okay, that might be difficult for some people, but that's not totally out of the question. Take a progress picture every day. That's number 4. Drink 1 gallon of water every day. If you've never tried to do that, have fun doing that. It's not impossible, but if you've never done that, that can be a challenge. And then number 6, 10 pages of reading every day. And then there is some fine print. You have until you go to sleep to complete the day. Okay. One of your workouts must be outdoors. Okay. Audiobooks do not count for your 10 pages of reading. And then you start back on day 1 if you fail any of these rules. So that means over the course of 75 days, you must do all of these things perfectly every single day. Let's talk about some of the pros just real quick, because it is pretty quick. There are not many of them in my line of thinking. One of the pros is that there's a big community around this, and that inherently is going to provide a lot of accountability. Just like CrossFit, this suffers from some of the same downfalls that CrossFit was put under fire for when it first became popular. Was the idea that you put a ton of people in a room doing the exact same workout that's not scaled based off of physical activity level or the fitness level or experience in the gym or anything like that, and that it's just everybody's doing the same thing and just working at 110% intensity. So but there is, just like CrossFit, there is a huge community aspect that brings a lot of accountability with them. This program has diversified areas of health metrics. And so you see things like the diet side of it, the hydration side of it, the workout side of it, the reading side of it, which is kind of seems like a bit of an oddball, but this is maybe in line with the idea that it's not just a physical fitness program, that it's also a mental toughness program. So that's a big piece of it, right? And lastly, as a pro, there are very clear parameters for the most part. It does say just follow a diet and just do some workouts, whatever that looks like. But it does have very clear parameters of these are the rules and you follow them or you have to start over, is the idea. And having clear parameters is very helpful for especially for people who are just beginning and trying to build the habit of working out and dieting in one way or another, or being mindful of their health overall. Rather than having this nebulous sort of idea of, oh, I generally think I'm working on my health, but I really don't have a great way of tracking that. That is a pro of this here. However, the list of cons is going to be much larger and much more not effective. The opposite of that. It's going to be a big detriment to this here. First of all, this is not only going to be overkill for beginners, it's also going to be not specific enough for those who are more advanced. So this program is not going to be great for anyone across the spectrum of a beginner to somebody who's more advanced. It's going to be overkill. I probably don't even need to explain that. Doing 2 45 minutes a day, every single day without fail. So doing 150 workouts in 2.5 months, that's going to be overkill for just about everybody. But for those who are more advanced that might be able to technically handle that from a physical side of things, it's not going to be specific enough to be able to cater to their needs, because just like I talked about in number 1, the more advanced that you get, the more specific your programming is going to need to be. And this doesn't really take that into account. Next up, it doesn't allow for much of any flexibility. Namely, if you fail, you start back on day one. Does that sound like a flexible program that's realistic or reasonable for anybody to be able to do? Much less if you're listening to this, you likely have young kiddos, and that's the stage of life that we are in as well. And I cannot imagine committing to something like this. And that kind of gets me into this next con here is it reaffirms the all or nothing mindset. And that's something that a lot of us fitness professionals are constantly trying to fight against is the all or nothing mindset. We want to look at it more as the doing something is better than doing nothing. Whereas this says if you can't do everything, then yep, doesn't count. You need to start over until you do that. Um, along those lines, it values consecutiveness over consistency, and this is something that I delineate for my clients often. Is in a lot of areas of life, we see even outside of fitness, we see this push for consecutiveness, where we look at like getting a streak of something, where we say, "Oh, I've been on a 30-day streak of doing this habit of." Quitting this habit of, you can picture what that looks like. I immediately think of my Bible app, which gives me a streak of how many days I've opened up the app. I think of Duolingo for learning a new language, where it tells you you've been on a 30-day streak or you've been on a 100-day streak. And that can be really exciting, but only really for the sake of keeping up that streak. It doesn't guarantee that you're actually going to be learning anything or reading anything. Uh, and then you have to think about, okay, what happens when you break that streak, whether it's on purpose or if things come up, if real life happens, and you go, oh my gosh, I feel like I've lost all my progress. When in reality, you haven't lost any progress. You just have not kept up that streak. And at some point, you will have to break that streak unless you keep it till the day you die. And so that all or nothing mindset and the consecutiveness, that can be a really big bad combo in that way. And so consistency is really the goal of, rather than trying to think of doing this for 75 days straight, think about if it was a 75-day program and you finished it in 80 days, would that really be a fail? I don't think so. So I think that the idea of consistency is it's much more worth trying to uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to like harbor that mindset and trying to bring that up. Next up, there's no guarantee of any specific result. This is something that a lot of programs suffer from. Is you could follow all of these rules and not actually get your intended result. Uh, you will likely, if you are doing all of these things put together, you will likely get a little stronger. You will likely lose a little bit of body fat. You'll have read maybe a book over the course of it. You'll have read 750 pages worth. That doesn't guarantee that you will have learned anything from the reading that you did. It doesn't guarantee that you are going to be healthier after the fact. Just by the vague following a diet and doing these workouts, whatever they are, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get stronger, or it doesn't guarantee that you're going to lose weight. If this, you will likely achieve that to some degree, but there's no guarantee of that, because you could be doing a trash workout program or following a diet that just tells you to eat organic foods, and then you go, okay, but that's not actually strictly related to weight loss or fat loss or whatever it is that your goal is. So you have to think about some of those kinds of things. This is sort of a brute force style of program, that brute force takes over priority over education. So you're kind of just doing all of these things and then just trying to really force yourself to do them, as opposed to learning the hows and the whys of why some of these things might be helpful. And then the big thing, right? 75 hard. This begs the question, what do you do on day 76? This leaves you with a few different options, and I don't know that any of them are great. You can repeat this process. And again, if that's the line of thinking that you take, you repeat it until the day you die. Is that really how you want to go about this? Do you go back to day zero habit? So if this program starts on day one, you complete your 75 days, and then what do? You brush off your hands and you go, okay, I'm just going to go right back to my old self. That's an option, but I don't know that's a great one. You maybe will feel confused about which aspects of the program to keep and which ones to leave behind. So maybe you recognize, okay, this is not sustainable in the long term, but I don't really know which of these things to keep and which ones to leave. You might have gotten some results. Maybe you lost a little bit of weight, or maybe you did get stronger, but you're not really sure which of the aspects of the program actually led to that. And so then you, again, are kind of feeling confused about that. And then a big thing that I would imagine is that a lot of people feel guilty about not continuing. And that first day off probably feels a bit like a failure, where you go, okay, day 76, I'm not going to do any of these things. Or maybe you don't do the all or nothing. Maybe you just take off some of them. But there might be something in the back of your head where you go, I don't feel like I've really accomplished much of anything because I survived, but now I feel like I'm starting my streak over again, and that is not a great ending point. It's not a great conclusion to this kind of a program. So I don't know. There's some thoughts about that program in particular, but maybe you can think about even outside of 75 Hard of programs that rely on some of these kinds of principles and how that is probably not going to be a great for most people with most goals. All right, enough about that. Moving on. Kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum here, actually. Group exercise classes are a waste of time unless you enjoy group exercise classes. So I am not against group exercise classes. However, I used to work in big box gyms and would see and have even led group exercise classes. And a lot of people join those for reasons related to, oh, I want to be able to get stronger. I want to be able to do something in a group environment. There's different reasons, some physical, some social, some educational, of just wanting to have a learning atmosphere rather than doing it on their own. Sometimes there's an accountability side of it. And some of those reasons I think are going to be more helpful and more meaningful than others. There are plenty of social reasons to love group exercise classes. And it's great for moving people from a more sedentary lifestyle to being more active. However, it's not going to help you build a meaningful amount of strength or muscle mass or cardiovascular endurance beyond a certain point. Meaning that if you do whether it's a Zumba class or if it's a kind of HIIT style or circuit training style of class, that can be great fun. It can be a great social environment to be able to be, working out with other people. And that can be a ton of fun is what I'm getting at. However, if you do that class for years and years and years on end, you might, if you went from not ever having worked out before or not having worked out intentionally before, you will likely become slightly more fit after doing that over time because you are lifting some weights, because you are getting in some extra steps, you're getting your heart rate up. But at some point, you're going to see some diminishing returns on that kind of a class. And not even the ones that involve some kind of, weightlifting in that, is that a lot of those are going to be more cardio based and more general physical activity based rather than focusing on building muscle or building strength. And so I'm not against group exercise classes, but I think that it's worth recognizing why you're doing that class and what you're hoping to get out of it, and that there's probably a point of graduation as far as the actual physical benefit goes, to where you graduate from that and you go, okay, now I have a basis of how to do some of these exercises. I have a basis of how to structure maybe a workout or two, and then you go from there and do it on your own. This would also include, in my head, like studio-based like specialized fitness programs, things like Pilates or things like bar classes, things like spin classes, all of this kind of stuff. It all kind of fits into this, all of these kind of boutique sort of ways of going about strength training or group fitness. And I think there's a big value in them. And the value is that it's social and that it's a ton of fun. And if that's what keeps you accountable for doing those workouts, that's awesome and totally good. But if you don't enjoy the class and you're not there for the social reasons, there are probably better ways of getting more fit in the long run. All right, next up, basic movement patterns are all you need right now. So I talked about this a couple episodes ago in episode 31, but it is very tempting, especially in this social media age where a lot of people get their workout and training information off of social media. It's very tempting to constantly want to swap out your boring old basic exercises for whatever new variation you find online, whatever new piece of equipment you see somebody using. And in my head, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. Not only that, but if you're constantly switching up your exercises or your workout style or the way that you're programming, it's going to be really difficult to track actual progress. Meaning that if you are doing something like a squat, for example, and you do that for 1 week, and then the next week you swap it out for a leg press, and then the next week you swap it out for a lunge, and the next week you swap it out for a split squat, and the next week you swap it out for a hack squat, and you're constantly switching it up for the sake of keeping it fresh mentally. It's going to be really difficult to equate the load and the intensity that you're using from one of those exercises to the next week after week if you're constantly switching that up. It's going to be a lot easier to track your progress if you stick with one of those for a period of time for a mesocycle or for your training program or whatever that looks like, where you stick with that for something measured in weeks or even months rather than just every week doing something new. It's going to be a lot easier to track your progress from one week to the next if you do the same thing from one week to the next and you change minimal variables like the load that you're using or the reps that you're aiming for, things like that. A couple episodes ago, I had one that was called talking about the 6 basic movement patterns. And the 6 movement patterns that I listed out were upper body vertical pushing, upper body vertical pulling, upper body horizontal pushing, and then the opposite of that, upper body horizontal pulling, and lower body squat based patterns and lower body hinge patterns. That the push, pull, squat, hinge, and the both the vertical and horizontal versions of pushing and pulling, that those are going to be your 6 patterns that you can rely on those as your basics, as your staples, as your ground foundational layer of your workout programs. You could do that, those 6, until the day that you die. I've said that phrase a couple times in this. I don't want to keep doing that, but you could do that for the rest of your life. You could rely on those. And of course, you can add some extra things in there too. But you can rely on those as kind of the bedrock of your workout programming and switch up variations from time to time. You don't have to do it all the time. And so this is a little bit of a caution against the temptation to just constantly want to switch things out for the sake of keeping it interesting. And I would say that you will eventually find it more interesting to make real progress and to get real results rather than just keeping yourself entertained mentally throughout. Next up, that was basic movement patterns are all you need right now. My next one is that basic equipment is all you need right now. And I, a couple weeks ago, had the opportunity to go to a new gym that was built in our neighborhood. And let me tell you, they built it from the ground up. So it wasn't retrofitted from like an old grocery store or anything like that, like the gym that I currently go to. They built it from the ground up and they had some awesome equipment in there. They had some equipment that I had seen online but never tried in person. They had some equipment that I have never seen ever. They had some technology that I've never seen ever. And it was amazing. And it was very interesting. But that's really what it was. It was interesting. I had to tell myself throughout that workout that I did, that I just used all the new equipment, just trying things out, that this was not inherently going to just skyrocket my progress because of the new equipment. And so this is again a little bit of a protection against the temptation to think that you constantly need either to buy new equipment or to find a gym that has the latest and greatest in terms of commitment. What I would say is it's worth asking yourself whether you're working out at home or you'll likely have this covered at the gym, but do you have access to enough resistance to make each of your exercises challenging? This is going to be a big thing to consider when it comes to especially your lower body exercises. Think about your squat based patterns and your hinge based patterns like deadlifts, hip thrusts for bridges, things like that, where those are probably going to be the lifts where you're able to lift the most weight. And for a lot of people lifting at home, if you just have a set of dumbbells up to a certain point, or if you just have a barbell with not a lot of extra weight in terms of your weight plates, then you might run into a scenario where those exercises become too easy. And so that would probably be the only limiting factor that I would really encourage you to consider is, do you actually have enough resistance or load at home, especially, or hopefully at your gym, to be able to make these exercises challenging? It's not about getting more equipment. You might start off with just getting more weight as far as weight plates or dumbbells or adding in resistance bands or things like that. But I would caution against the idea of trying to just constantly outdo yourself with getting the latest and greatest and fancy equipment and stuff like that. All right. And last up, before obsessing about optimizing your workout split, exercise selection, set techniques, et cetera, your first order of business is to build consistency in doing your workouts. This is a little bit of a chicken and the egg scenario where which one comes first. So your workouts do need to be enjoyable and effective enough, right, to be able to build adherence. But beyond a certain point, more planning is not going to be more helpful without more consistency. And this is something, again, that kind of talks about the equipment, talks about the exercise selection, where it's really tempting to focus on those things and to hope that those in and of themselves are going to give you results. But consistency and intensity are going to be two really big factors that really come before that. And so the more, if you start off with a base level of something that's enjoyable enough and effective enough to give you some results in order to build adherence, then you can apply intensity and consistency, and then you can explore out from there rather than hoping that just variety in and of itself is going to be your savior here. If you're interested in more on what this kind of looks like here as far as the consistency side of it and applying these last few opinions, in episode 29, it's called How to Write Your Own Workout Program in 2023. I talked a lot about this, and that would be a great place to be able to start with putting together not only your own workout program, but learning the principles behind what's involved with that. All right. That's it for today's episode on Unpopular Opinions. I hope that you enjoyed that, and I hope that it challenged some of your perspectives on all of this here too. As per usual, go ahead and take a screenshot before this episode ends of your whatever app you're listening on or watching on. Post it on social media, give me a tag, and let me know that you're enjoying what you're listening to here. All right, I'm Coach Jay. Thanks for hanging with me, and we'll see you next time.